Hi, remote learners. This is Mrs. Childers, and I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about short stories. We are coming into a unit where you're going to write a Latin myth, and so I've shared with all of you a document called The Elements of Short Story, and you should be looking at that. I don't think I need to read it over for you, but in brief, every good story has a setting, characters, the plot, resolution, and a theme. And you can see the definitions because I went ahead and I printed that out for you. But what I did with the class on Friday is I actually read them a book, and we are going to talk about the elements of these stories. So we're going to try this, okay, and see how it goes. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to talk about it. So once upon a time, there were 3 cuddly little wolves with soft fur and fluffy tails. When it came time for them to go into the world to build themselves a house, their mother warned them to beware of the big bad pig. The 3 wolves eventually paid by a load of bricks and built themselves a strong and lovely brick house. And when they finished, they sat in their house and drank tea and admired the strong walls. The next day, the big bad pig came prowling down the road and saw the house of bricks that the little wolves had built. The 3 little wolves were playing croquet in the garden. When they saw the big bad pig coming, they ran inside the house and locked the door. The big bad pig knocked on the door and grunted, little wolves, let me come in." "No, no, no," said the 3 little wolves. "By the hair on our chinny chin chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea leaves in our china teapot." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," said the pig. So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, but the house didn't fall down. But the pig wasn't called big and bad for nothing. He went and fetched his sledgehammer and he knocked the house down. The 3 little wolves only just managed to escape before the bricks crumbled, and they were frightened indeed. "We shall have to build a stronger house," they said. Just then they saw a beaver who was mixing concrete in a concrete mixer. "Please, will you give us some of your concrete?" asked the 3 little wolves. "Certainly," said the beaver, and he gave them buckets and buckets full of messy, slurry concrete. So the 3 little wolves built themselves a house of concrete. No sooner than they'd finished than the big bad pig came prowling down the road and saw the house of concrete that the little wolves had built. They were playing battledore and shuttlecock in the garden, and when they saw the big bad pig coming, they ran inside their house and shut the door. The pig rang the bell and said, "Little frightened wolves, let me come in." "No, no, no," said the 3 little wolves. "By the hair on our chinny chin chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea leaves in our china teapot." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," said the pig. So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, but the house didn't fall down. There they are playing battledore and shuttlecock, which are distinctly British things. But the pig wasn't called big and bad for nothing. He went and fetched his pneumatic drill and smashed the house down. Oh my. The 3 little wolves managed to escape, but their chinny chin chins were trembling and trembling and trembling. "We shall have to build a stronger house," they said, because they were very determined. Just then they saw a truck coming along the road carrying barbed wire, iron bars, armor plates, and heavy metal padlocks. "Please, will you give us some of your barbed wire, a few iron bars and armor plates, and some heavy metal padlocks?" they said to the rhinoceros who was driving the truck. "Sure," said the rhinoceros, and he gave them plenty of barbed wire, iron bars, armor plates, and heavy metal padlocks. He also gave them some plexiglass and some reinforced steel chains because he was a generous and kind-hearted rhinoceros. So the 3 little wolves built themselves an extremely strong house. It was the strongest, securest house one could possibly imagine. They felt absolutely safe. And there they are with that kind-hearted rhinoceros. The next day, the big bad pig came prowling along the road as usual. The 3 little wolves were playing hopscotch in the garden. When they saw the big bad pig coming, they ran inside their house, bolted the door, and locked all 37 padlocks. The pig dialed the video entrance phone and said, "Little frightened wolves with the tribbly chins, let me come in." No, 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 said the little wolves. "By the hair of our chinny chin chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea leaves in our china teapot." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," said the pig. So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, but the house didn't fall down. But the pig wasn't called big and bad for nothing. He brought some dynamite and laid it against the house, lit the fuse, and oh my, the house blew up. The three little wolves just managed to escape with their fluffy tails scorched. And their little china teapot in hand, it would appear. "Something must be wrong with our building materials," they said. "We have to try something different, but what?" At that moment, they saw Flamingo coming along, pushing a wheelbarrow full of flowers. "Please, will you give us some flowers?" asked the little wolves. "With pleasure," said the Flamingo, and he gave them lots of flowers. So the three little wolves built themselves a house of flowers. Their one wall was of marigolds, one of daffodils, one of pink roses, and one of cherry blossoms. The ceiling was made of sunflowers, and the floor was a carpet of daisies. They had water lilies in their bathtub and buttercups in the refrigerator. It was a rather fragile house, and it swayed in the wind, but it was very beautiful. The next day, the big bad pig came prowling down the road and saw the house of flowers that the three little wolves had built. He rang the blue bell at the door and said, "Little frightened wolves with the trembly chins and the scorched tails, let me come in." "No, no, no," said the three little wolves. "Not by the hair on our chinny chin chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea leaves in our china teapot." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," said the pig. But as he took a deep breath, ready to huff and puff, he smelled the soft scent of the flowers. It was fantastic, and because the scent was so lovely, the pig took another breath and another, and instead of huffing and puffing, he began to sniff. He sniffed deeper and deeper until he was quite filled with the fragrant scent. His heart grew tender, and he realized how horrible he had been. Right then, he decided to become a big, good pig. He started to sing and dance the tarantella. At first, the three little wolves were a bit worried it might be a trick, but soon they realized that the pig had truly changed, so they came running out of the house and they started playing games with him. They played Pig Pog and then Piggy in the Middle, and when they were all done, they invited him into the house. They offered him tea and strawberries and wolfberries and asked him to stay with them as long as he wanted. The pig accepted, and they all lived happily ever after. The end. So I told my classes that this is a children's book that is a little bit disturbing, but I think it has a really nice moral, and it is a short story. So let's look at this sheet for a moment. You have a nice typed copy. But let's just talk for a minute, just what the setting is about this story. So this setting isn't terribly specific. It doesn't take place in a particular country, although you could infer from the terminology and the games they play and their tea that this took place in Great Britain. But it mainly takes place in houses and outside, so kind of general. And then when does it take place? It really doesn't specify a time in history, and there aren't many contextual clues. We can't look at them and say what their houses look like a historical time period. They're not wearing clothes. So this is a very broad setting. It can really be anywhere, anytime in history. That's how a lot of nursery stories are, okay? If we come over to the characters, so think about for a minute, what's the protagonist? Who would you say is the main character or characters in the story that you're pulling for? And that probably is going to be the three wolves, and the antagonist, the opposing character who wants to smash their house, would be the big bad pig. And then, you know, allies, are there friends of the protagonist? Not really. There are sidekicks. There are these little side characters, the peddlers that give them supplies. You could say that the mother is a mentor. Jokers or comics, maybe the peddlers. The story itself is a little bit funny in a dark kind of way. But really what I would say is in this story, you've got your protagonist and you have an antagonist, and that's the main characters. So you need to have at least those two. Okay, so conflict. What is the basic problem in this story? Well, the pigs just want to build a house. They just want to build a house and be safe, and this big bad pig keeps tearing down their house. And so the rising action is just what are the different houses they build, and the pig comes and keeps tearing them down. And so the climax, what's the peak of suspense where it seems like things can't get worse? Well, it would seem that that's after they build their highly secure, safe house, and the pig comes and dynamites it, and there's actual injury. They scorch their tails, and really, what else is there to build after you've built a safe house and it's been destroyed? So the resolution. So the resolution starts when they build a house of flowers, and the big bad pig smells the flowers and becomes a good pig, and they live happily ever after. And that is a classic resolution in fairy tales and nursery stories, that the characters just live happily ever after. But we know from stories, like even movies like The End Game, a lot of times your favorite character dies, and there's a tragedy. You know, in Romeo and Juliet, the main characters die. So sometimes the resolution can be tragic. It can be very sad. But in this case, it's a happy resolution. And then it's always good to think about what's the message, what's the theme. And we've talked about that in my classes today, and they've said things like you should learn to forgive your enemies, which is very biblical. People can change. Always give a second chance. We had a little bit of a debate about what changed the pig. Was it the friendship of the wolves? Was it smelling the flowers? Did the wolves build a house of flowers hoping to be friends with the pig? So, you know, it's nice to have a story that has a little bit of meaning. So, those are the elements of a story. And now I'm going to talk for a minute about your next assignment, which is going to be this myth, okay? And so, you guys are going to have, of course, your due dates are a day later, but you're going to be writing a short story. And I wanted to read this particular story about the three wolves to you because it's based on a real story. It's based on the three little pigs. And one thing you could do in writing a Latin myth is you could choose a myth and you could change the characters, or you could do a plot twist, or you could bring the characters into a modern day setting. So I am not very good at creative writing, and that's what I would do because I think it's hard to come up with a good plot. And if you'll notice in the details of this that you're writing a 2 to 4 page myth. I'm going to really enforce the 4 pages. Usually when I give a length, you can go within a half page of that, so it can't be more than 4.5. And Mr. Smith is going to be giving an assignment, and he's really going to work on the elements of a myth. But when we've done this before, I do know that one element of a myth is there needs to be some element of supernatural. The characters need to have, at least one needs to have supernatural strength. Usually myths have got an explanation, a message at the end, or they're explaining how something was created. So another option for your storyline would be doing a creation myth. So we know the story of how the sun rises is based on Apollo driving his chariot across the sky. So maybe you could take something modern like TikTok. You know, what would be a supernatural myth that could describe the beginning of TikTok? You could bring Greek gods and goddesses into the current day, or you could create your own gods and goddesses. So the hardest thing is going to be coming up with your subject, okay? And if you've ever done this before for another class, you need to come up with something original. I don't want you to take a myth you've written in the past and just recycle that. So you're going to be doing a storyboard overview. So that's going to be what's due on Thursday for you guys, is you're going to write an outline of your story on the storyboard. So you're going to give me the setting and who's your protagonist and antagonist, what's your conflict, what is your climax, okay? And then we're going to go over Mountain of Conflict. And in your storyboard, you really don't need to list the rising action. That's going to be the Mountain of Conflict. But you do need a resolution and kind of a message. So this is your overview. This is kind of your keyword outline. And so there's different things you're going to be expected to include: setting, character development, conflict, rising action, climax, resolution, theme. You're also going to be expected to include literary devices like simile and metaphor, alliteration. I'm going to teach you some others, okay? And then this is the attached rubric. I am not going to give that to you right now because I don't want you to write to a rubric. I'll probably give it to you at the end of this week, or maybe the beginning of next week actually, and it's useful for going back and seeing, editing your writing. But this assignment is worth 127 points. It's going to be in first quarter, no rewrites. Now, if you want some feedback, here's the stuff that's a little bit sticky. Mr. Smith doesn't have his due date yet. And in the past when I've done this, I like to have you turn in the myths to me a week before they're due for Mr. Smith. And so I'm not sure when his due date's going to be. He's probably going to try to get this into first quarter like I am. And so you have two options. One is before next Wednesday, 10/14, you could share a rough draft and just get preliminary feedback from me. Okay, I'm not going to do a deep grading, but I'll give you feedback, and that could help you. The other thing is you could turn your paper in for a grade in composition on Friday, October 16th, and then I would commit those that come in on Friday, you will get it back on Monday. So if your myth were due that week, you'd have a chance to make changes. Okay, so here's a couple due dates. Storyboard's going to be due, okay, these are going to be changed for you guys, so you're going to get the assignment sheet, but I will change your due dates on the remote learner page. We're going to have time in class, it's due at the beginning of class, late submissions will have 12 points deducted, okay? So that is a combination of Friday's class, reading that story, taking notes on the different elements of story, and introducing your Latin assignment. And the only other thing that I need to mention is we are doing this as part of a conjunction unit where we're going to be talking about the role of conjunctions, and I gave notes on that on Friday. So I'm going to list that as a video separately, and I'm going to go over the homework from that separately. Okay.